Imagine hearing a voice beneath 10 days of rubble. Not a rescue team. Not a machine. A human voice. On January 22, 2010, in Port-au-Prince, Haiti, a family sleeping beside the ruins of their home suddenly heard something they had almost stopped believing they would ever hear again. Moaning. They dug with their bare hands. 20 hours later, they reached an 84-year-old woman who had been trapped beneath the wreckage since the earthquake. Her name was Marie Carida Romain. She was alive. But the unbelievable part wasn't simply that she had survived 10 days under a collapsed building. It was what condition she was in when they finally reached her, and how close the world had come to giving up on finding anyone alive. January 12, 2010 began like an ordinary day in Haiti. Then, at 4:53 in the afternoon, the ground violently moved. The earthquake measured magnitude 7.0. Port-au-Prince, Haiti's capital, was devastated. Buildings collapsed. Roads were blocked. Hospitals were overwhelmed. And thousands of people disappeared beneath concrete, masonry, furniture, and twisted debris. For people trapped inside those buildings, the first few hours were about survival. The first day was about hope. But as the days passed, hope became something much harder to hold on to. Search teams worked through dangerous ruins with dogs, cameras, listening equipment, and their own hands. Every movement of the rubble could bring a rescue, or cause another collapse. And beneath all of it were people whose families had no idea whether they were alive. Marie Carida Romain was one of them. We know surprisingly little about what happened to Marie during those 10 days. And that uncertainty is important. There is no reliable diary from beneath the rubble. No recording of her thoughts. No complete account of what she ate or drank. What we do know is that she was trapped when her home collapsed. Her family remained nearby. And for days, there was no sign that she was alive. That detail matters because the rescue operation was already changing. By the 9th day, international search teams were finding fewer and fewer signs of life. Some teams were beginning to pack up. The operation was shifting from searching for survivors to caring for the enormous number of people who had already survived the earthquake. The odds were becoming brutally small. Then came day 10. Somewhere inside the ruins of the family home, something changed. Marie was making a sound. Her relatives were sleeping in front of the collapsed house when they heard moaning coming from underneath the wreckage. Think about that moment. After 10 days of uncertainty, they didn't hear a phone. They didn't see a hand. They heard a human being. Alive. They called for help and began digging. But this wasn't a clean rescue site with heavy equipment and a clear path to the victim. The family and neighbors had to remove debris by hand. And they kept going. For approximately 20 hours, they dug through the wreckage. Slowly. Carefully. Because every piece of debris could be resting on the fragile space where Marie was still alive. And every mistake could turn a miracle into a tragedy. Eventually, they reached her. Marie Carida Romain was alive. But she was in terrible condition. Contemporary reports described her as extremely thin, unconscious or barely responsive, and severely dehydrated. Doctors also reported serious injuries, including damage to her chest. Her body had been exposed to conditions that would be dangerous for anyone, let alone an 84-year-old woman. And yet her heart was still beating. She was transported to the General Hospital in Port-au-Prince. Doctors immediately began trying to stabilize her. One physician involved in her treatment described the situation with extraordinary restraint. There was very little hope, but they were going to try. That distinction is important. Being pulled alive from rubble is not the same thing as being out of danger. The rescue was only the beginning. So how could a person possibly remain alive for 10 days beneath a collapsed building? There is no single answer. And anyone who gives you one simple explanation is oversimplifying a very complicated survival event. The key may have been the space around her. When buildings collapse, they do not always become a perfectly compressed pile. Furniture, walls, beams, and other objects can create small voids. Sometimes those voids become life-saving pockets. A person may be crushed, or, extraordinarily, they may end up inside a tiny space that protects vital organs. Airflow can also matter. If there was an opening, even a small one, fresh air may have reached Marie. And then there is the question of water. This is where the story becomes even more uncertain. The contemporary reports describe Marie as severely dehydrated, but they do not establish exactly how she obtained enough moisture to remain alive for 10 days. Rain, condensation, leaks, or small amounts of water trapped in the environment are possibilities. But we should not turn possibilities into facts. What we know is simpler. She survived, and she was badly dehydrated when rescuers found her. 10 days is an almost unimaginable amount of time to spend trapped beneath a building. But the human body does not operate according to a simple countdown clock. There is no universal moment when a person must die because they have gone a certain number of days without food or water. Survival depends on temperature, exertion, injuries, humidity, access to moisture, air, and countless individual factors. For someone trapped beneath rubble, one of the most important strategies is often the one they have no choice but to follow. Don't move. Movement costs energy. It increases breathing and heart rate. It can make dehydration worse. And beneath unstable debris, movement can cause additional injuries or bring more rubble down. If Marie had a survivable pocket around her, remaining there may have been one of the few things keeping her alive. But she wasn't simply waiting in a safe room. She was trapped in darkness, injured, dehydrated, and surrounded by the remains of a city that had been shattered around her. And somewhere above her, her family was still waiting. This is the part of the story that makes Marie's rescue so powerful. Because she wasn't found at the beginning of the search. She was found when the search was already winding down. On the 9th day, no living person was pulled from the rubble. International rescue teams were beginning to conclude that the chances of finding more survivors were fading. Then, on the 10th day, an 84-year-old woman was discovered alive. And Marie wasn't the only extraordinary rescue that day. A young Haitian man, Emmanuel Buzeau, was also pulled alive from the ruins after roughly 10 days. His survival became another reminder that the rubble still contained people the outside world could not see. The lesson for rescuers was painfully simple. As long as there was evidence of life, there was a reason to keep looking. Imagine being Marie's family. For 10 days, you don't know. You don't know if your mother is alive. You don't know if you should keep calling her name. You don't know whether the next sound from the ruins will be a piece of concrete falling, or a voice. Then you hear it. Moaning. The family began digging. 20 hours. Bare hands. One piece at a time. And eventually, they saw her. This is why the most important image in this story isn't the collapsed building. It isn't the earthquake. It isn't even the rescue equipment. It's the moment a family realized the ruins were not silent. Someone was still inside. And that someone was their mother. Marie was taken to the hospital and then transferred toward the US Navy Hospital Ship Comfort, which was treating large numbers of critically injured earthquake survivors. The medical reports from the time make clear just how fragile she was. She had survived the collapse. She had survived 10 days beneath the wreckage. But she still faced a serious medical crisis. And this is where we have to be honest about what the historical record can and cannot tell us. The contemporary reporting confirms that Marie Carida Romain was rescued alive and received medical care. It does not give us a reliable account of her long-term recovery. So the real miracle is not a neat Hollywood ending. It is the fact that, against extraordinary odds, an 84-year-old woman was still alive when her family finally reached her. For 10 days, the world above her had moved on. Search teams were losing hope. The city was trying to survive. And yet beneath the ruins, Marie was still there. The human mind has a hard time imagining 10 days in darkness. No sunlight. No normal sense of time. No idea when help might come. And perhaps worst of all, no way to know whether anyone outside could hear you. But Marie's story contains something that is easy to miss. She didn't survive because the situation was safe. She survived inside a situation that should have been fatal. Some combination of space, airflow, limited movement, individual physiology, and sheer circumstance kept her alive long enough for someone to hear her. And then her family did something just as remarkable. They listened. They didn't walk away from the ruins because the search was becoming hopeless. They heard a sound that could have been dismissed as debris settling. Instead, they dug for 20 hours. And because they did, the world learned that 10 days under the rubble did not necessarily mean the end. Sometimes, somewhere beneath the destruction, a person is still waiting, still breathing, still hoping someone will listen. Marie Carida Romain was 84 years old. She was pulled alive from the ruins of her home 10 days after the Haiti earthquake. Her story is not a story about being invincible. It is a story about the astonishing uncertainty of survival, and about what can happen when hope refuses to become silence. Because on the 10th day, beneath a mountain of rubble, someone heard her, and they dug. If you enjoy incredible true stories that sound impossible, but really happened, subscribe to Wild Stories After Dark. Every week, we uncover astonishing events from history that prove reality is often stranger than fiction. Because sometimes, the wildest stories are the true ones.